Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PHLY Draft Show with Fran Duffy. We are here finally to talk about the outliers in this year's draft class on offense. Very excited about this episode, Fran. I think it's going to be a good conversation, sort of a facsimile of the conversations that might be happening in the beginning of the draft process in draft rooms as they try to figure out, do these things matter? And we're talking about measurables or production or testing results athletically that might be outside of the scope of what you would expect from an elite prospect.
Yeah, and that's what, the longer I've gone through this process, the more I start to think of it as each of these players is, it's like you're making a gamble, right? You're making a bet. You're trying to decide who is a worthwhile bet, with all of these factors that you just laid out, and who would scare you off. And at what point are you willing to make that bet? When are you willing to take that gamble? And it's going to make for interesting discussions. Dare I say, maybe our most fun discussion yet on this show.
I think so. Let's overpromise. Why not? You all waited so long to join us for this episode. We might as well deliver for you. So one thing that I have done over the past few years, Fran, is I go back through all of the players. It started with the past 10 years. I've kept the sample since then, so it's now about like 14 years or whatever it is. But all the players in the NFL who have made either a first-team All-Pro or the initial Pro Bowl roster. So none of those replacement Pro Bowlers. And then I go through there. If it's a quarterback or a running back or wide receiver or a tight end, there's production stuff. You can get that for pass rushers as well, but also their athletic testing, their measurements and stuff like that, and find out what the thresholds are at these positions, and are there prospects who are towards the top or bottom end of those things or outside of those, and then let's decide whether that stuff matters. And so let's start a quarterback. Okay. I want you to sell me on Tyler Shough here because there's a little bit of self-parody here, and I understand that part of the problem with this exercise now is that the landscape of college football has changed so much. So guys stay a little bit longer. That is a thing. But Tyler Shough, 25 years old, going to be 25 years old as a rookie.
Yep.
None of the elite quarterbacks were older than 24. And if you are going to be 25 years old, I mean, man, you better be elite at something. And Tyler Shough is going to be 25 years old, and his college completion percentage, 63%, 62.7% in his final year. And I'm looking at the other guys who were old. You're talking about Joe Burrow, who completed 76% of his passes his final year in college. Jaden Daniels, 72%. The only guys who compare at all, you got to go back like Kirk Cousins and Carson Wentz. Those guys were both 24 years old, but even they had better touchdown interception ratios. So if I'm going to buy Tyler Shough at 25 years old with mediocre production in college, why?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, part of it is going to be the nature of this quarterback class. In a different class, maybe he's getting a little bit less shine. I do think that the tape is pretty good this year. If we didn't have this season with Tyler Shough, I think you're probably talking about him as a late round option at best. But this year's film has certainly been better than anything else he'd put on tape previously with Texas Tech. He came into college as a backup to Justin Herbert in Oregon. So this is a guy that's been around the block, as you mentioned. The injuries have led to small sample sizes, so that is I think that kind of impacts the statistical profile a little bit. But yeah, like even as I'm going through a lot of my metrics, looking at some of the next level stuff, whether it's adjusted completion percentage that counts for drops and throwaways and things of that nature. Like above average this year, 80.5% adjusted completion rate. When he was from a clean pocket, and that's solid, but that's nothing special. I think at the end of the day, a lot of these numbers paint a solid picture, but nothing that you're going to go, oh man, like let me buy in all the way there. And when you factor in the medical situation as well, yeah, it makes it a tough one to bet on. I will say Cousins is one of the names I wrote down while watching him. I do think that's the ceiling there is of a Kirk Cousins. I wrote down Davis Mills as well. So potential to be a solid starter at the very, very maximum possible outlier, but more than likely a solid backup.
With this exercise, right? Is the draft is about more than just trying to hit home runs and finding elite players. There is value in guys who fill out your roster. And yeah, maybe the value of a low-end starter in this draft, as you like to remind us, in this draft, which is maybe not so deep, a guy who could be the 20th best quarterback in football at maximum is maybe worth a late first-round pick, potentially.
And also, like, honestly, in any class, I would argue that a low-end starter at quarterback is worthy of that. That's why, in my boards, that will always be reflected as being.
But that's if it's a certainty, or if it's like the middle result. Not if you're crossing your fingers and hoping, please God, get me to the 25th best quarterback in football.
Yeah, I think that when you're looking at it overall, you are taking a gamble here, especially because of the medical situation. Now, the big thing with the medical, right, is that we mentioned there was three season-ending injuries: 2021, 2022, 2023. The first two injuries were broken collarbones. That's not that you don't hear about a guy having a chronic collarbone issue, right? That's kind of like a freaky thing, right? Where it's like, all right, like he broke it once and then he re-injured it the following year, and then the year after that in 2023 he broke his leg. So it's not like, oh man, you got to worry about that knee, or it's a degenerative shoulder.
Drink some milk.
Well, maybe
those bones.
but that's what I mean. When you're looking at it, there's nothing that you would say like, okay, this is a sign for future durability concerns down the road.
Yeah, I don't see anything that's like, okay, fine, I'll take the risk for this guy, but someone else is going to take him if it's my draft room.
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, when we're talking about Tyler Shough, that's why I would never like say like, oh man, like he's a first round pick. I really like his film.
Yeah,
I think that he's got some of the best film here in the class, but I could not get on board with drafting him that high for the reasons that you've laid out.
You wanted to talk about Jackson Dart.
Yeah, with Jackson Dart, I think that and look, we're getting a lot of buzz now about him going high in the first round. We've seen a number of mock drafts now where he is a first round pick. And there are a number of things that do scare me when you're looking at the profile. There is a lot to like. He went out and he executed a very highly schemed offense that does have pro-style concepts. A lot of people think that, it's Lane Kiffin, it's spread, it's get the ball out fast. In terms of like how often he threw a screen this past year, how often screen passes were incorporated into the offense. It's only 10.3% of the time. That's a fine number. We've seen some other quarterbacks, like Trevor Lawrence's was like through the roof when you looked at his profile coming out. And that was one of the things that I worried about with Lawrence was that it was either vertical shot plays or screens and RPOs, and there was nothing like really in the middle there with Jackson Dart. The one thing that I do worry about, and this was a number I remember talking about this. There was a conversation I had with Sheil Kapadia last year in the last draft cycle when it came to Jayden Daniels. And it was how often he scrambles when he's pressured. So there's the one number that goes around a lot is pressure to sack rate. It's like, all right, how often per sack per pressure? And that's actually a very good indicator. Dart's number on that is pretty good. When you look at how often he is pressured when moved off his spot, it was 43.5% of the time. That is an extremely, extremely high number. And when I go to who are the other quarterbacks that had a number that high, Jayden Daniels is going to be on that list. He actually was number one on that list. It was 62.4% of the time. But when you look at all the other quarterbacks that were above 40%, we'll say 40%, there's 14 quarterbacks drafted in the last decade. None of these other guys really hit. So you have Jayden Daniels at the very top. That's the outlier. I'm just going to buzz through the rest really quickly. Michael Pratt, Matt Corral, Hendon Hooker, Jacoby Brissett, Jake Rudock, Kellen Mond, Trey Lance, Chad Kelly, Justin Fields, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Tommy Stevens, Nate Peterman, Sam Howell. That's the rest of the group. You had a couple backup quarterbacks in there. All the guys that did somewhat hit were elite athletes. I don't think that Matt Corral is an elite athlete. He's a solid athlete. He can scramble. He can make plays outside the pocket. But how often he stays put and tries to deliver and tries to and make those throws once he's pressured, a little bit of a red flag there.
So for you, you're letting someone else take him. Probably.
I mean, certainly as high as what we're talking. Because I think, again, when you're looking at Jayden Daniels and even Justin Fields, there were like A+ traits there, not just from an athleticism standpoint, but from an arm talent standpoint that I think are missing there when you're looking at what Jackson Dart brings to the table.
Do we care about arm length for quarterbacks? There's a bit of an epidemic in this class.
Okay.
Like
well, the arm length thing is
guys,
weird.
I know the arm length thing at the combine was a thing this year, right? And it actually shows up in all of these numbers. But specifically with Cam Ward, I want to ask you, because he is at the bottom of the arm length threshold, basically, just bigger than Kyler Murray and Brock Purdy. And he's also got small hands.
Right.
So the only guy among these quarterbacks who was both at the bottom of hands and arms is Purdy.
Oh, okay.
Who were you going to say?
I was going to say Baker Mayfield.
I think Baker had bigger.
Baker had 30.
Or maybe Baker hasn't yet gotten to this threshold.
That might be what it is.
That's the problem. Yeah.
I've got Baker at 30 and a quarter, which is very short arms, and 9 and a same hand size as Purdy.
He hasn't gotten to the Pro Bowl yet.
Yeah, right. And Tua had big hands for his size, but he had the very short arms.
Same with Kyler Murray.
Yes, Kyler Murray.
But yeah, Cam Ward at 30 and 5/8 on the arm, 9 hands. Do we care about it?
No. To me, like when it comes to all the physical measurement stuff, it's not an issue for me unless it's an issue on tape. And I never had an issue with Cam Ward's ability to like control a football and and all that. To me, like that never showed up on film.
A couple of quick things to buzz through. Jalen Milroe, this goes to the scouting report.
Yep.
But 17.4 attempts per game as a quarterback.
Okay.
Only Carson Wentz is lower than that among this sample.
I like that. I haven't looked at that number.
And that speaks to like this is a guy who has a lot of room to grow potentially, or does it speak to they didn't trust him to throw the ball?
Yeah, I mean that's with Wentz. That was a run heavy offense
with Wentz,
Yeah, with Wentz, and so that's the thing is that with a lot of these numbers, you have to like get into like the why behind some of it. With Alabama, with Milroe, some of it is, he's going to take off and run. Some of it is like, all right, he came in as a young quarterback. Like, did they trust him early? How much did that happen late? There was a new system this year as well. So there's a lot to unpack there. It's a good question.
Dylan Gabriel is like a super outlier. I mean, he's teeny tiny for a quarterback, 5'11", 205. But he also has more games started and attempts than anybody else in the sample. He's also got a great statistical record in the completion percentage and touchdown interception ratio. You just think just too limited athletically?
I think the physical tools there keep me from getting super excited about the profile to the point where I would say like he's more than a mid-round pick at best.
And then last thing, Shedeur Sanders, worth saying, the best completion percentage of any of these quarterbacks in college.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that look, that's when you're looking at Shedeur Sanders, like just purely as a passer, he's extremely impressive. His accuracy, his ball placement, his toughness. Now there are things that inside the pocket, dealing with pressure, that are major red flags. But again, it doesn't always like necessarily pop off, in the numbers. But it's a lot of the highs are high and the lows are low with Shedeur Sanders.
Okay. Thank you for the super chat, Cash Squatch. We will get to that when we get to the tackles and guards. We will discuss your question. Let's go to the running backs here, Fran. And we both looked at Quinshon Judkins. I'm curious if it's going to be about the same reason. But why don't you go first?
Okay, give me 1 second. Let me pull mine up because I've got one. I actually put it in my notes, which if you are a diehard, you've got access to the draft database. You got my access to all of my notes here on all of these players. All right, so Quinshon Judkins, 62.5% of his college yardage over 3 years, 2 years at Ole Miss for Lane Kiffin, and then this past year at Ohio State with Chip Kelly. But 62.5% of his yardage this year over his career came versus light boxes. That's 6 defenders or less. Only 8 running backs drafted in the last decade had a higher number than that. And only one of them, Ramondre Stevenson, who ironically enough is the guy that I actually comped him to in the summer, has found extensive NFL success as an impactful runner in the NFL.
That's fascinating because here's my Quinshon Judkins thing. One thing, this is maybe my favorite thing to look at with running backs. I'm going through and I'm looking at the yards per carry of all their teammates. Okay, so they're running back teammates.
I love this one.
Over the course of their career, because it should be a relatively apples to apples comparison.
Right.
All of these running backs in this elite sample, from the NFL over the years, I've got 38 guys. Only 3 of the 38 in college had fewer yards per carry than their teammates, and the worst of those was negative 0.5 for Devontae Freeman. Quinshon Judkins, over the course of his career, negative 1.1 yards per carry away from his teammates. Now, listen, I know that Travion Henderson is in there, but if he's also facing a high amount of light boxes and getting that fewer yards per carry, I don't know.
Yeah.
No thanks.
That's interesting. I like that. That's why you and I didn't talk about these beforehand, because I wanted to have natural reactions to it. One of the fun parts about doing these exercises is you could find like the magic bullet for like a bunch of these.
Sure.
But when you pair things up, that's when you start to say like, oh man, like that's a tough hill to climb over. Pairing those two numbers together doesn't paint a pretty picture for Judkins, who look, he's going to come off really well from certain analytical numbers because of the way he tested at the combine.
Well, that's the other thing. His broad jump, it's the best broad jump of the entire sample.
Yeah.
It's like an inch bigger than Alvin Kamara's, who was the higher, and his vertical jump was very good too. So he's explosive, but does that explosiveness play on tape?
Not really. Where it does show up, he's got power. And when you're looking at the broad jump, that is always a good marker for a guy's power. Just the explosiveness in that lower half. And for a big, but when you have like short area explosiveness that shows up in the 10-yard split and in the broad jump with weight, that is typically when you see like your best power backs, right? Like your Derrick Henrys of the world. And Judkins has that. That said, like I didn't always love his feel in traffic. You look at some of his biggest runs this past year for Ohio State. This one play that they ran a handful of times. It was they were really nice play calls from Chip Kelly. Would be like, all right, they would have. Initially, it would look like it was going to be some kind of an inside run. He would take one step and then go out towards the perimeter, towards the sideline, and then Will Howard would just kind of pitch him the ball. And now he's in wide open space, and now he builds up momentum. He gets up to the second level, and he's just hard to get to the ground. But working downhill in traffic has not always been like his calling card. And when you pair that with the fact that, again, 63% of his yardage came against those light boxes in his career, a little bit worrisome.
Yeah, I think I'm out on Quinshon Judkins.
That high, yeah.
I'm not saying, of course, there's always going to be, but.
Yeah, so it becomes like, okay, like an understanding of what is the role that you would expect from Quinshon Judkins. If you're saying that he is what Jordan Howard became for the Eagles, which was like, all right, like he's your thunder and a thunder lightning duo, like, all right, you could swallow that. Like in terms of him being we'll say like a 4th or 5th round pick, maybe you could swallow that. But if you're talking about taking him in the 2nd or 3rd round, you need him to be more. You need him to be the foundation of your offense.
The light box thing is interesting. Who is the flip side? Is there a player? I would imagine that Ashton Jeanty was facing the highest amount.
Ashton Jeanty faced a lot of heavy boxes. Yeah. So really quickly, I can look at that. Just give me a second.
I will tell you while you look for that the two other guys in the top of this draft, or your top 10, 12 running backs who had the negative relation to their teammates, yards per carry. Woody Marks. Negative 0.6. He's also, he's a little bit older, and the only older running backs in this sample are guys who were from small schools. Now, this is one where the landscape of college football matters a little bit, but doesn't look so great statistically, profile speaking. And then LaQuint Allen just underneath. He's only 4.6 yards per carry from his teammates.
Jeanty is the one that's really that is the most impressive number there. So 24%. Yeah, 24% of his carries came against light boxes. Omarion Hampton is at 41%. So that's a below average number. That's not like a terrible number. But Jeanty, by far, faced the heavier boxes more often.
Do you know who has the best relationship to their teammates, their running backs in yards per carry in this class of the top guys?
I'm going to say, just buzzing through real quick. Is it Scatabo?
It is not Scatabo. He was a little bit above. Brashard Smith.
Okay. Smith's an interesting profile just because, 4-year receiver at Miami, who then transferred to SMU, became a running back, so only a 1-year starter at running back, and had a big year for a team that went to the playoff.
And he is also light. 5'10", 194. 194 is the low end of this group. Kyron Williams was there. Philip Lindsay was a little bit under that, but a player who potentially has some upside there. And then the last one I wanted to ask about, is it Bashal Tootin?
Bashal Tootin.
Bashal Tootin. Very explosive.
Yes.
It's not a huge sample of 10-yard splits that we have for the running backs going back historically, but his is the second best of them all, and it's also the third best vert, and he also checks out well relative to his teammates. So an interesting statistical profile. Short arms, which I don't think we really care about.
Right. But not only that, so he had the great athletic testing, which what's funny, like when I went back and studied him in the fall, I remember he had like this great track background. He was like was a great sprinter, 60 meters. South Jersey guy, actually located Paulsboro, New Jersey, right across the bridge. So
Zach is yelling at us right now.
Zach's very excited by this. But when I watched him, I didn't see all the time like, oh, this explosive athlete. But what I did see was his ability to play through contact. 71.6% of his yards came after contact last year. 4.18 yards after contact per attempt. Outstanding number. So when I look at those, 0.33 missed tackles forced per attempt, all those are like outstanding numbers. So when you pair the athletic profile with his ability to make people miss and the ability to play through contact, cooking with gas there. I like it too.
I'm going to look forward to watching him now.
Yeah, I like it too. I compared him to, I had Chase Brown written down.
Okay.
And I also had Jaylin Warren written down. Jaylin Warren is not known for like his breakaway speed, but just his ability to make people miss kind of stood out when I watched Tootin.
All right, let's go to the wide receivers.
Okay.
Jaylin Noel, one of the more interesting outliers in this class in several ways. Okay. So size-wise, he's just over 5'10", 194. That's on the low end, right?
Yep.
Both his hands and arms are very low. Zay Flowers actually sort of brought the floor down on this because he had really short arms and made the Pro Bowl this year. But he's got the second best vert of all these wide receivers. I mean, you're talking it's Calvin Johnson and then him.
Yep.
He's ahead of Jamar Chase and DK Metcalf, and he's also got the third best broad jump. But my question is, if he's this explosive,
right?
11.7 yards per catch. That is so low on this list. It is Wes Welker and Antonio Brown. That's it. Everybody else is way above that. So if he is this explosive marvel, I know he's an inside player, but can we see a little bit more explosiveness on the field?
Yeah. Stay with me here for a second because I'm going to look this number up live as we're going because. All right,
I will also say that this is a bit of a similar question for Luther Burden, who I know that you do like, and he's only at 11.8 yards per catch, and also has small hands.
And this is career number, right? Not just this past year.
Yeah.
So Jaylin Noel's average depth of target over the course of his career was 8.3. It was actually 12.2 this season. So the fact that it was still 12, it was only 8.3, but it was 12.2 this season tells you what that usage was over the first 3 years of his career. And honestly, you could take a lot of this conversation and apply it to Burden. The big thing, though, is you want to be able to see, like, okay, how often is he, because we're going to talk about this in a little bit with a different receiver. There's the average depth of target, but then there's also, like, how often is he targeted down the field? When you look at, certain guys, it's like, okay, well, they got a lot of targets that were close to the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage, and that's going to bring the number down. But they still had a decent amount where they were targeted down the field. You still saw some of those deep balls. With Noel, that was the case, where you still saw like a decent amount of those. It's just, do you have enough to counterbalance and bring that yards per catch number up? So that's the big thing there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the kind of thing where if you're going to tell me that this is just the offense they run or something like that, and we can unlock something else, maybe I'm willing to believe it. But I don't know. This is one where I would want to know why it doesn't match.
So he's
also, I think I said before, but he's also very low on the hands and arms.
Yeah, he was targeted deep on which PFF qualifies as deep as plus 20 yards downfield. 23.4% of his targets this past year, which that would put him right around the 50th percentile of receivers drafted in the last year. So that's that's not terrible.
Okay, you want to talk about Tez Johnson?
Yeah, actually, this was the one I believe I changed this to. Did I change this to Emeka Egbuka?
You have both.
Okay, I had both. All right, so the big one, the Tez Johnson outlier thing is, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's a guy that is that small, that light, but that slow. And this is what I was worried about with Tez Johnson, because when I watched him, I was like, okay, like he came in, he was listed at 160. He came in at the Senior Bowl 156. He came in at the Combine at 154. So 154 pounds. And I'm like, okay, like he has got to run 4.3s at that size. He can't be 4.5. He can't at 154 pounds. They've got the speed. Do you remember the speed score?
Yeah.
It used to be a thing. It was talked about a lot, and it's not brought up as often now. But I actually keep track of speed score just because it's a nice weight-adjusted formula. I do it for every single position. And that would be, he ran 4.51 at the combine, Tez Johnson. That would be the worst speed score of any receiver drafted in the last decade. Not only that, I'm fairly certain I'll double check it. I think it would be the worst speed score of any player drafted in the last decade. It's just to be that small and to be that slow. That's a tough outlier to overcome.
Okay, and then how about Emeka Egbuka?
All right, so here's the thing with Egbuka. This goes to the conversation we were just having about Jaylin Noel. Let me pull up the exact number. So when you look at Egbuka, he came in. He's a 3-year starter. He played 4 years at Ohio State. The last 3 years, it was primarily in the slot. We know that, hey, they had Marvin Harrison Jr. This past year, they had Jeremiah Smith. He was constantly Robin to another player's Batman. He was always that next guy in line there. But he's a really good player. PFF has charted 221 receivers drafted in the last decade. Only 11 of them were targeted less often down the field than Egbuka. So I was talking about how some of those numbers, the average depth of target, that can always get bought down. Egbuka was rarely targeted down the field. 12.6% of his targets. None of those players have ever made a Pro Bowl. The 11 that were targeted less often down the field. So for a guy that's being talked about, it's a top 30s pick, top 35 pick, you were going to have to kind of thread that needle there. And I like Egbuka on film. I do think that there's a chance that he just becomes like a solid rotational piece in a receiving core as opposed to even like a really good number 2. And I think that's something that should be taken into account when you're talking about his transition to the NFL.
Okay, that makes sense. A couple little ones. Tell me if you think they matter.
Okay.
I don't know that this one really is a big deal, but Alec Ayumanor and Isaiah Bond, 12 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns each. Josh Gordon is the only guy who had fewer touchdowns, and he had, played like one season or whatever it was.
Yep.
I don't know. I'd like to, if you're an NFL caliber wide receiver, I'd like to see you get to pay dirt.
Yep. So a couple things. So when you're talking about Isaiah Bond, going back to one of the stats you brought up at quarterback.
Yeah.
He played with Jalen Milroe and averaged passes a game. Yeah. Like there was less to go around, and he was a complimentary piece last year at Alabama. So that's one thing. Then he got dinged up this year at Texas. So he only played about half the season.
Okay.
So that would impact the sample size there. Ayumanor from Stanford, similar kind of deal. Missed an entire season with an ACL injury, then came back in 2023. Wasn't 100% until like midway through the year, and then played this full year for a bad Stanford team. Going back to Zach's hatred for the Cardinal. I think that there's ways you can explain away that production.
Do you care about Travis Hunter's weight if he's a wide receiver?
No, I don't.
Yeah, 185. It's on the low end.
It's on the low end, but he's so gifted. I'm good with that, especially because I think if he had run, we're talking like low 4.4 guy. That wasn't one where I was watching saying like, oh man, like I don't know what that speed score is going to look like.
And then I don't want to ding the guy for this, but I just want to say Matthew Golden, his 4.29 is faster than anybody else. Like we haven't had any of the guys who were just like who am I thinking of? Darius Hayward-Bay, like sell me just on speed. Those
John
guys
Ross,
haven't really hit all the way, but I'm not holding that against him, but just for the record.
Yeah, when you look at the guys that were,
DK Metcalf is 4.33 is the best in the group.
Tyreek Hill ran 4.29 at his pro day.
Yeah,
but not at that. But we're looking. It's like Henry Ruggs, Xavier Worthy, John Ross, Anthony Schwartz, Brashad Perriman, Mario Alford, Tyquan Thornton, Philip Dorsett, Will Fuller, Tyreek Hill, J.J. Nelson, Rondell Moore, Danny Gray, Christian Watson. There's some nice players mixed in there, but it's a lot of guys that did not turn out.
Okay. All right, let's go to tight end.
Tight end.
Oh, what a great class of tight ends this is. Oh, this I mean, some of these profiles are not so great.
Okay.
This was the one where it really was like thinking back to the first episode. We're like, you got to know, like, in this draft, and I'm like, okay, but at tight end at least. But all these guys have look at all the red on this spreadsheet here.
Okay, what do you got?
The one I'm going to start with is actually not based on athleticism or anything else. Harold Fannin Jr.
Yep.
This is a different thing at tight end where, compared to all the other positions, tight end is one of the two where the highest percentage of these guys come from big schools, Power 5 schools.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Trey McBride entered the sample this year. Julius Thomas, if you go all the way back,
right,
and then Travis Kelce, who was in the
Cincinnati.
at Cincinnati. So Harold Fannin Jr.'s production, amazing, and actually is the best.
Yes, crazy production
after Brock Bowers now.
Right.
But why do you think that is at tight end? Why do you think tight end? It's like all the guys from the elite schools.
That's a good question. I think that it's one we talked about this before the combine, where that is also a sneaky like traits position where you need height, weight, speed, strength. Like you need all of that stuff to kind of add up in your favor. And obviously those guys typically are going to come from your bigger programs. It might also just be sample. There's I would imagine that there's there's fewer names from this group than, compared to wide receiver, right? A smaller sample.
That's true.
That'd probably be the other one that come to mind.
Okay. How about 40 times for tight ends? Okay. So all the guys in this group, now Brock Bowers ran a 4.72.
Right.
Zach Ertz ran a 4.76.
Right.
Those are the two slowest in the whole group. Every one of the tight ends in your top 10 who ran the 40 at the combine
right.
was slow.
Yep.
Was 4.73 or slower. You got Fannin, who ran 4.73, Jake Briningstool, who ran 4.75, Jackson Hawes, who ran 4.83, Moliki Mataveo, 4.83, Gunnar Helm, 4.93, and Gavin Bartholomew, 4.73.
So Helm,
which is slow pokes.
Yeah, well, Helm did it on the ankle. He sprained his ankle. And
Okay.
the thing. So that all right. So you throw that one out. The top three guys of the position didn't work out.
Yeah.
So,
okay. But this is the best tight end class we've ever seen.
Yeah. I mean,
time on sundials.
Let me look real quick one thing, because the other aspect of it is when I look. So, really quickly, I do the same thing with like the color coding for my 10-year thing. And typically, the way I look at it, instead of looking at the raw numbers, I will look at the weight adjust, and I'll say like, okay, like the speed score. All right, how many of those guys were helped by that?
in particular, he's 6'6", 260. It's okay that he's around a 4.83 to me.
All right, so Fannin Jr., his weight adjusted score below average, but it's the 40 was below average. Briningstool, bad. That was a running a 4.75.
Briningstool is just all red here.
Yeah, that's not good. Jackson Hawes, not good.
No.
Didn't run well. Mataveo, 97.1. Yeah, that's fine, but that's still not, that's below average. Gunnar Helm, we just had to kind of throw that one out.
Bartholomew was the other
not a great test run from the 40-yard dash time for this tight end group. I'd agree.
Maybe the clock was slow that day.
Yeah, it might have been.
Okay, a few more things.
Okay.
Production wise,
yes,
we've talked about Arroyo, Elijah Arroyo. You have said he didn't really do anything until this year.
The injuries, yeah.
But a bunch of injuries. It should be said that of the tight ends who actually played tight end in college, like for real. So we throw out Jimmy Graham, we throw out Jordan Cameron. That's the fewest amount of receiving yards, except for George Kittle. Now George Kittle, is a good story. Briningstool is like all kinds of red flags. His size, his hands, his arms, his speed, his vert, his yards per carry. Now yards per carry is an interesting one. Briningstool is at yards per catch. 10.9, Mason Taylor, 10.1. Both of those lower than everybody in the sample except for Jordan Cameron again.
Interesting. For Briningstool.
Both Briningstool
and
Mason Taylor.
Yeah, Taylor's a tough profile, man. It's really interesting because I think that there certainly is ability there, and he had a good combine workout. Like he didn't do any testing, but the position workout was good. I thought he was solid at the Senior Bowl. I just feel like there's something missing there. He's one that would fit in the category that we talked about. Was it last week, the week before? We were like, are you scared that you're missing? Like, who are the guys that you're worried about?
Yeah.
He's one where I'm like, I need to go and watch a little bit more, because I feel like everybody else is higher on him than I am. But I know the times I've studied him, there's something missing there.
And then last one, Jackson Hawes. I mean, I know that you're not.
He's a certain player.
He's a certain type of player, but am I using a real pick on a player who's bringing nothing to the table as a receiver?
Look, some of those guys that bring nothing to the table as a receiver get paid on the open market. So, it's just that's why he's high there for me, because I do think that he has the ability to be like one of those like elite blocking tight ends. I can really quickly just tell you like who are the guys that I feel like kind of fit that mold that I feel like he can be. I mean, Josh Oliver got $7 million a year from the Minnesota Vikings. Luke Farrell just got paid almost $7 million a year by the 49ers to be that guy. Ian Thomas was $6 million a year from Carolina a couple of years ago. Brock Wright, the Detroit Lions, signed him to be tight end too. He's over $4 million a year. Like, Those guys get money.
Okay.
I think he can bring value.
Do you care about Tyler Warren's short arms?
No. Without thinking about it, no. Give me a second, though.
31 3/4. That is tied for the lowest in the group with Zach Ertz.
Okay, so let me look real quickly. So where is he at? He's at 31 1/4.
Yeah, 31 3/4.
31 3/4. So Dalton Schultz was pretty low. Yeah, there's not a lot of guys that have the short arms at that position that were got. The new Eagle Harrison Bryant, really low on that list.
There you go.
30 5/8. Fourth shortest of any tight end draft in the last decade.
Very exciting. Did you have another tight end in here? Did I miss that? You had Jackson Haas, but that's
Jackson Haas. Yeah, that's the
yes,
exactly right.
All right, let's go to the offensive line.
Okay, this is a big one.
This is a big one. I want to start with Will Campbell.
Okay.
I don't want to harp too much on arms, but it is at 32 5/8. The shortest of any of these All-Pro tackles is 33, which was Rashawn Slater. And I don't know, does that show up on tape? Do you think he has to move to guard?
So one of my first projects I did, this is actually like the fourth time I've said this on an all-city show this week.
Okay.
Because everybody's asking about Will Campbell. So one of the first things I did after the combine, after we got the official measurement, was, okay, let me just go back and just watch. PFF has this thing of the true pass sets, where it's eliminate play action, screens, RPOs, like all the things where it's like, okay, like it affects the pass rush drop, and let's just look pure dropbacks. So one of the things that I always pull is how often is a player asked to do it, and then what does he do when he's asked to do it? Okay. So of all the tackles drafted in the last decade, Will Campbell is number one in how often he was asked to just do a pure pass set. 39%.
Okay. That's interesting.
Number one. In all of those pass rush sets, he was credited with 0 sacks allowed. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing about it too, when you look at, and we can talk about like offensive, we've talked about like pressure conversations and stuff like that, because that can be wonky with offensive linemen and defensive linemen. That said, it's what we have. Typically, when you're looking at the guys that come in off the offensive line and play early, so they play as true freshmen, all of these numbers are going to look bad. They're not going to look good. Those guys are 18 years old, 17 years old. They come in and they're asked to block 20, 21, 22-year-olds, and they struggle. They give up pressures. They give up sacks. They give up penalties. Will Campbell came in as a day one starter at LSU, was a starter from day one in training camp, 0 sacks allowed in those areas, was a captain in year 2, just didn't give up any production in the SEC. Think of all the great pass rushers in the SEC the last 3 years. And he shut them down. I'm just like, that's a bet I'm willing to take. That's a bet I'm willing to take.
Okay, that's good. I feel like that you won that conversation. In the draft room, that didn't move the needle too much. I think that's a good job. Some other guys with short arms, tell me if you're concerned about these. Now, Ariante Ursary, for a big guy to have short arm, like a big guy like that is a little bit concerning to me, potentially, maybe more so.
How short were the arms there?
33 and 1/8. It's not terrible.
That's in the 20th percentile. That's not ideal. Yep.
Miles Frazier, 32 3/4 is
He's
on the low
guard
end.
anyway, but still be low for a guard.
And then Marcus Bowe, is a worrisome one to me because 32-inch arms, which is way below.
Yeah.
But he's also light at 303 pounds. So if you're thinking, can he kick to guard? That's also a projection. Can he hold up physically there?
He is a zone guard for sure. And some people view him as a center. I actually am probably going to end up moving him to my interior line group for that. After getting those measurements, I think that's where I'm going to end up putting him. He has said that he has worked a little bit on snapping. If memory serves, he did a little bit of that in Mobile just to kind of work through that. Yeah, he did get some center snaps in Mobile. I think I'm going to have to move him to the interior line group overall.
Okay. What about Donovan Jackson? Will you move him inside?
No, I think I'm going to keep him tackled.
Shortest tackle in the group.
Yep, shortest tackle. The fact that I may have thought about it had we not seen what we saw at the end of the season, where because of Josh Simmons' injury at left tackle, they ended up kicking Jackson out to left tackle, and he did really well against down in the playoffs, down the stretch in the regular season, held up well. So I'm going to keep him with my tackle guard group, even though he's going to be a guard. He's got more of tackle flex than center flex.
Okay. Shout out to Cameron Williams. Biggest hands. Bigger hands than Tyron Smith. 11 3/8.
Big old hands.
Big mitts.
I always think of the Lane Johnson tweet when his,
the easier to hold with, I guess.
When his first child was born, he posted like the picture the baby's hands were ginormous, like, big old hands. So I think of with Cameron Williams.
I will ask you about Anthony Belton and Josh Connerly in like an hour when we're on the Eagles show.
Okay,
the Eagles have brought both of those guys in for visits. They both have. Well, I'll ask you about him now. Belton's a big fella.
Yeah.
Right. And Connerly stands out. The vert would be the second best of any of these guys. So there's some explosiveness there.
Yeah, I think different archetypes of offensive linemen, unique and unusual in their own ways. Connerly, more so for the athleticism, really light feet. He needs to get stronger. That's his big thing. We all saw like the extreme low light clip from the Senior Bowl where Mike Green just obliterated him in that pass rush rep. But even when you're watching him on film, the anchor is the question there with Connerly. The analytical numbers are pretty good on him overall. Like, just did not give up a ton of pass rush productivity over the course of his career. When you're looking at Belton, he is much different. He
5'2", 640.
Yes. 336 pounds. So that actually, and the 5'2", 640 is actually not a terrible number.
Okay.
It's below average. And the speed score is an average number at 87.8.
Okay. He's the second heaviest guy after Orlando Brown Jr.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. This is a big, he is more of your Mekhi Becton style of player. He's not as explosive as Becton was coming out of Louisville. That's why Becton was a top 10 pick. But that's the archetype of player.
And then last thing, Charles Grant, just decision making. Why are we gonna if not everybody's doing the bench press? Why are we doing it if we're only getting 19 reps?
Yeah, especially. I mean, he's got longer arms. So I know that there are some teams that will have a formula of like arm length with bench press reps and trying to find to try and give you some kind of a strength score there, because obviously you're pushing weight further if your arms are a little bit longer. Who was the former Eagles center that David? Oh,
David Molk.
David Molk. He's got the bench press, or he had the bench press record at a certain point. And he's got like 30-inch arms, right? Yeah. I mean, honestly, and there's no like analytical number on this, but for the Charles Grant profile, the thing that is most worrisome, because he didn't do anything at the combine other than the bench press.
What are we doing, dude?
I know, but he didn't do anything at the combine. He didn't do anything at the Senior Bowl. And he's coming from a lower level of competition.
Right.
So, like, to not have him, it's not necessarily, like, we're going to get test scores on him at some point. I would imagine during, like, the pro day, we're going to get test scores. But being able to watch him go through drills next to guys from Alabama, Oklahoma, USC, you know what I mean? Like, being able to just kind of see that, I think is more. We said the same thing last year about Vince's guy, Karen Amagaji from Yale. He did the same thing. He couldn't, because of injury, like, couldn't go through the pre-draft process. For a small school guy, that's a little worrisome.
Good opportunity to circle back to that super chat from our friend Cash Squatch, who says, we always hear he'll be a guard at the next level. So a guy who's projected to go from tackle to guard at the next level. Are there any tackle prospects who can't play guard for some reason? Thinking about the Eagles pipeline in particular, where you're looking for the eventual lane replacement who could play right guard right away.
Yeah. So here are the things that you would say, like, all right, that would prevent you from being able to play guard. Things happen faster inside. So if you're worried about a guy's like mental aptitude and be able to like react to like stunts and twists, things happen faster at guard than they do at tackle. You would say that a guy needs to move into tackle if he doesn't have like the foot quickness to be able to get to the edge, right? But if a guy is you think of like an Andre Dillard where he struggles to anchor.
Right.
Moving him into guard is not going to help that, right? So like when we talk about like Josh Connerly, some people have felt like, oh, Josh Connerly, he might have to move into guard because of arm length or something. Some people have said that, that's been talked about. If you have an issue holding up against bull rushers, against a 255-pound bull rush from an edge rusher, that's not getting better against a 305-pound defensive tackle, right? And so
that's how I felt about Jordan Morgan last year. He
Yes.
goes to the Senior Bowl and he has 100%. Got no anchor at tackle, and then they draft him, move him to guard. Like, that's not going to work.
And so, like, some teams are like, all right, well, we can give him more help at guard. We're a zone team, and we're a run heavy team, so you can kind of mask that a little bit. That's why some people will say, all right, that guy immediately has to go to center because that can get mitigated a little bit at center. You can hide that. You can hide your anchor a little bit more at center because you're not necessarily always dealing with guys that have that disruptive ability at nose tackle, unless you're going up against Dexter Lawrence or and the Vita Vea, like the 2 players in the league that have that ability to line up on the nose and immediately bench press guys 5 yards deep into the pocket. But
so Connerly would be the guy from this draft class, so you would be a little bit hesitant to think could just kick right inside and be fine.
Marcus Bowe is one that I would put in
for
there
the reasons we talked about
from Purdue, and we talked about him. No one's really talking about with Kelvin Banks, but that would be an issue for me with Kelvin. I'm worried about Kelvin Banks' his anchor. This is the left tackle from Texas. A lot of people are very high on him. He was being talked about as a top 5 pick through most of the fall. I'm going to be honest. I've done like 3 pass-throughs on Kelvin Banks. I've never once felt like, oh yeah, this is the kind of tackle you're drafting that high. The anchor, a big reason why for that one. Just buzzing through real quick. Yeah, I think everybody else, I think I'm okay there. Armand Membu was another one that had been talked about because his arm length was brought into question. He came in at 33.5. Not ideal, but I don't think that's prohibitive. And I think, honestly, his anchor was honestly pretty good. I never once saw him overwhelmed. So he could play into guard if you needed him to, but I think he'll be fine to tackle as well.
All right, let's close out with the interior guys.
Okay.
And we'll go with the guy who's, the consensus top interior offensive lineman, Tyler Booker, 6'5", 321. Stands out for a few reasons. He's got long arms and big hands that are at the top end of this sample, but he's also, very low on the broad, very low on the 10-yard split and the 40-yard dash. So that sort of paints the picture of what I'm expecting the player that he is, right? This is a big, ugly who can't move that well.
Yeah, and
that's fair.
I think that's fair. I would not have expected that he was going to go in and he was going to light the combine on fire. He would have been a trust the tape type of player for me. I'm just looking at RAS, so the relative athletic score from MathBomb. Shout out to MathBomb on social media.
Shout out to MathBomb. Shout out to Science Bomb, Language Arts Bomb, all the subjects.
All the stems. I think when you're looking at who are the guys that have a sub 5 RAS, I've got, from the interior offensive line, I've got 20 guys, and I'm seeing a handful that became starters. So it's not a huge...
It's not a
huge red flag.
Board, but
But I will say, so there was only one first-round pick in that group. That was Laken Tomlinson. And Laken Tomlinson, really quickly, his testing was better across. Was better across the board. Now he wasn't as heavy. That's the big one. That's the thing is when I'm looking at the RAS, a lot of these guys weren't the big uglies. A lot of these guys were like modestly sized players that just like didn't have. But like Ben Powers is one who was a day 3 pick out of out of Oklahoma, and then he became a solid starter in the NFL. Ted Karras from Illinois became a longtime starter at center. Yeah, but the other thing too, and I got to see that I don't think the numbers have come through in terms of a pro day workout. I don't know if he's going to try and improve on some of those numbers.
Yeah,
and he might. And if he does, that's going to change what the profile looks like.
Okay. So if you are sort of scheme dependent for him, you think?
Yeah, and that's why like the team he was most often mocked to before the combine was Miami. Not in a million years would I watch him and think that he was going to play in that system. Now, Chris Greer has drafted a lot of those big ugly guards and had success with those guys, but not when Mike McDaniel was the head coach. So I think that if you're looking at that, like that system never really made sense for me. But there are other teams where that would absolutely. Honestly, like if he were on the board for the Eagles at 32, I would see him as being a fit for what Jeff Stoutland wants.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And also, by the way, like A+ intangibles, everybody raves about
Booker.
Yeah, they like heartbeat of that offense. Like he was the guy, he was the ringleader of that whole group. I've heard good stories about Tyler Booker.
Your boy Gray Zabel.
Yep.
Best vertical jump if you're counting him as a guard of all the elite guards, and he's also he's big for the position.
Do you include our guards and centers together in
yours? I
have
2 separate ones.
Oh, got it.
The best though, I think he would still have the best.
Got it.
So if you're looking at both of them.
Okay.
Jared Wilson, good 40 at 4.84. Big hands, 10.34. And Jackson Slater also stands out as the high end of hands and weight.
He's a good player.
You like a Slater?
I like a Slater.
How do you feel about a Jonah Monheim?
I like Monheim. I think that there's a chance that he's probably a better.
He's got Mulk arms.
Yes. More athletic than Mulk.
Okay.
Played tackle. I mean, that's the thing is he played tackle up until this year. He didn't move to center until this past season and did pretty well playing tackle. Like didn't look completely out of place. Moved to center this year and immediately took over all the pre-snap stuff. Like very, very impressive there for Jonah Monheim. Has played some guard as well. So you're talking about a player that has theoretical 5-position flexibility in the NFL, which is very valuable. I do think that in terms of range of outcomes, it's probably most likely that he's like a high-end backup as opposed to a low-end starter. But I do think that he's got starting potential.
And then last one, Seth McLaughlin.
Yeah.
For centers, he's got the best broad. Does have very short arms, and he's also, if you just talk about guards, it would also be towards the best of the broad jumps with Evan Mathis.
He did testing? McLaughlin? Because he tore his
According
ACL.
to our draft guide, maybe there's a mistake in there. You have a 115-inch broad jump, 34-inch vert. You think that's a miss?
I think that might be a typo. He tore his ACL in like October.
Congratulations! What a recovery.
I was gonna say, I don't know about.
Where did that come from?
McLaughlin did testing. Let me check on that one. Hold on, just make sure it's possible that I'm messed up here. I did not put the combine numbers in.
Of course, your hands are clean. There's no blood on your hands.
Real quick, hold on, loading. All right, here's the thing from NFL.com.
The Wi-Fi is not as good in this room.
Right, yeah, the studio. We need that Studio B Wi-Fi. Yeah, I don't
okay,
think
that's a mistake.
It looks like it's a
cross Seth McLaughlin off your list.
Yeah, because he tore his ACL in like practice in like November.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Baldiani Fran Super Chat wants to know who was your favorite guy to do so far.
Should we do the last few days?
Sure.
Okay. One sec. Actually, there's an easy way for me to do this. 1 second.
I'm going to sit back and relax now. I don't have to reach out to the laptop. I can really relax.
Okay. My favorite guy that I've watched in the last few days. So I just go to the draft database. I can sort by the big board ranking.
You won't know unless you come into the studio just how deep these chairs are. It's difficult, you know. If I sit all the way back here, it's a little bit lazy looking, but
I know that's the only thing.
Up here, you know.
I was very cognizant during the post-game show during the season of trying to make sure I didn't do that, and I'm sure I'm looking terrible right now.
I think you look fantastic.
All right. So I've watched a few players. So I watched Jacob Parrish, the corner from Kansas State. He ended up being my CB10 after watching him yesterday. He's a good player.
Okay.
Dane's a big fan. I haven't texted Dane about him yet.
Not sure who that is. Dane.
Dane Brugler, our friend from The Athletic.
That's right.
Dane's really, really high on him. I just finished up my study on him. I think he's a nice player. There's a lot to like from like an explosiveness standpoint, good speed. I think he's tricky because he's one of those corners. You know how I'm picky when it comes to my corners. He's got really good instincts from off, but he's really aggressive in press, and he's got great speed. So there's like a press man skill set, but I don't think his route instincts when he's hip to hip running with a guy vertically down the field, he gives up a lot of separation on those plays where a guy like puts his foot in the ground and breaks backward on a comeback route or inside on a dig. He gets turned around really easily there. I think he sees things better when he's playing from off coverage. He says that he likes playing man more than zone. So it's just kind of a tricky thing. He's played some inside and outside. I think he could be a really good nickel. So there's a wide range of outcomes there with Jacob Parrish.
Put that on the coaches. Like you got to trust your coaches to get that right.
I gave him a higher grade than I like him more than Jahdae Barron. We talked about that one. I did Jamari Caldwell, 6'2", 330-pound defensive tackle.
Okay.
You would think 6'2", 330. Oh, this guy he's a nose. He actually has like some 3 technique capability. He's got the ability to get upfield. A really disruptive player from Oregon. Only played there 1 year. Was at Houston before that. But studied his tape in depth for the first time, and I really liked what I saw there. I've done a lot of like back checks on pass rushers. So going back and rewatching a lot of those guys. Actually. No, I've got this is one, and he was not at the combine, so he wouldn't show up in your. This is a great way to close this show. Willie Lampkin.
Okay.
Do you got anything on Willie Lampkin at all?
No.
Okay. He's played 5 years, 5-year starter along the offensive line. First at Coastal Carolina, then he transferred to UNC for the last couple of years. He goes to the Senior Bowl. I had not watched him yet. He was a late call up to the Senior Bowl. The measurements come out, and I thought it was a typo because he came in listed. Let me just pull up my numbers here rather than reading them off the depth chart. Okay. All right, so he came in Mobile at 5'10" 3/8.
Oh, I already love this guy.
Yeah, 270 pounds.
No,
and I was like, okay, like wrong position. Like, what
is he a center?
So he played guard at North Carolina. Okay, he played right guard there.
For context, there has not been. Again, we're talking about just the elite of the elite, and you're not only drafting him to be elite. The shortest offensive lineman at any position who has made a Pro Bowl or anything is 6'2".
Yep.
Rodney Hudson and Tyler Linderbaum.
Yeah. My shortest guard center, shortest interior lineman drafted in the last decade was 6'007". So just under 6'1".
Yeah.
He's 5'10" 3/8.
And
so
the lightest,
3-inch difference.
The lightest is Kelsey at 280, and of course he had food poisoning.
Right. The lightest I have is in the last 10 years drafted 295, and again 270.
All right. So that's the context for Willie.
That's the context going in. He made my all-practice team at the Senior
that
Bowl.
guy is fighting for his life out there.
No, I was like, oh man, like he's gonna have some ugly reps. Dude, he was so good at the Senior Bowl.
Why did they get him to the combine?
Because of the size. I think the size that they just ruled him out, and they were like, yeah, like he's not a guy we're gonna invite to Indy.
I love it.
There was a rep in the Senior Bowl where, hold on, let me pull it. I actually want to pull it because I don't have it here. There was one where I think so. A defensive tackle went to like throw like a hump move at him and just like basically went full club, right hand hook to the face. Dude, he took his right hand and went like right under his face mask and then threw him to the ground and then stepped over him after. I was like, I love this guy. I love this guy. And so because he didn't get invited to the combine, I didn't study him before the Senior Bowl. So I didn't get to him until this past week. I think he could be a starting center.
Yeah?
I do. He is. So he's got 61 starts, more than any offensive lineman drafted in the last decade. 4,100 snaps played in college, more than any offensive lineman drafted in the last decade. Played at North Carolina the last 2 years. 0 sacks allowed, 4 hits allowed in those 2 seasons combined, playing at guard. Really athletic, outstanding competitor. Has played all 3 interior offensive line spots. Again, probably going to be a center only in the NFL, at that size. He's a really smart pass protector in that he knows, okay, I can't. So there's different pass sets, right? I'm speaking to the audience now. There are different kinds of pass sets. You can vertical set where you're literally moving backwards. You think of Lane Johnson, he likes to set vertically. Then there are like your quick sets, your jump sets where you are almost horizontal. So you think of the Howard Mudd offensive lineman. It was like, all right, I want to get out to this guy. And the thought process is, if you are 270 pounds, if you vertical set, you are giving the offensive or the defensive lineman all kinds of momentum, all kinds of time to get on top of you, and honestly, like build momentum so he's going to run through you. Yeah. So he is so good with his quick sets and his jump sets. He's on guys fast in pass protection and doesn't let them build. So I never saw him overwhelmed. Never once saw it. There were a couple of reps in the Senior Bowl where it's like, that was rough. He had 1 rep in the run game on the goal line against Josh Farmer, who's a defensive tackle from Florida State in this class, where Farmer just ragdolled him and threw him to the ground and made the play. And I'm like, all right, he's going to have those ugly snaps. But dude, he's so good in the run game.
I love this guy.
Like he's he's a certain kind of player. But
think about it. Listen, he's been dealing with this that entire time. He's been the littlest guy already. He knows,
undefeated state champion wrestler in high school in Florida, 2A, so not the biggest schools, but it was at Lakeland High School, which is a good football school. First team All ACC last year.
In this draft. First round pick.
At 270, and so here's the thing too. When I body typed him, I was like, all right, I want to see what he looks like. He looks like he's maxed out. Like I don't think he's getting a lot bigger. I don't think he's getting to like 295. He is going to be like in the 270s. So he's either going to be like the most outrageous outlier, or he's going to have to move. Like, honestly, that's why I felt watching him at the Senior Bowl. I'm like, all right, maybe he doesn't play offensive line, but he might go beat Patrick Ricard. Like, he might be like a move tight end and just be like just a killer as a fullback, and it'll be a lot of fun.
The guy you want on your team.
Guy you want on your team.
I love this.
Oh, man. I'm so glad that you asked that. This question was asked so that I could remember to bring up Willie Lampkin.
That's perfect. What a way to end this episode. Fantastic. Willie Lampkin.
He's going to be on the top
offensive lineman of this show.
He's going to be in the top 100, I think. For
really?
I think so.
Yes.
If he's not, he's going to be he's in like the top 125, 130. Because I was just sitting there, I'm like,
not really a stout guy.
I think he's going to become a starter.
I love it. Fantastic.
Yeah, it was fun.
Shout out to Willie Lampkin. All right, thanks everybody for watching this episode of the PHLY Draft Show with Fran Duffy. We will be back next week. Should be back at our normally scheduled time, Tuesday at noon, and we'll be doing the same exercise for the defensive players in this year's draft. So we look forward to that. Stay tuned for the PHLY Eagles Show coming up at 2 o'clock. Duck, Duck, Juice today. A classic. So for Fran and Julia, thanks for sticking with us through all the hiccups early on. We'll talk to you next week. And as always, we love you.
We all silly like the mayor.